Hello, and welcome to Spokane County Spotlight. I'm your County Commissioner, Josh Kerns, and joining me today is Mike Sparber, Senior Director of Law and Justice for Spokane County. Mike, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Before we jump in and talk about the criminal justice system and Measure 1, could you start by giving us a little bit of background about yourself? Just to kind of introduce yourself to our audience.
You bet. I'm a native of Spokane. I grew up a good portion of my life here in Spokane, and started in the law and justice field in 1988. I started at the jail, and I started off as a corrections officer and just kind of worked my way up through the ranks to lieutenant and assistant director, and then ultimately a director. Then moving forward, I had an interest in the criminal justice system and how it impacts the jail overall. So I've been working on a lot of been involved with a lot of committees like the SRLJC, Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council, the MacArthur Foundation, and some of the reform efforts that go with that. So it kind of went hand in hand and kind of made me the ideal candidate for Senior Director.
All right. Well, can you tell us a little more about the Senior Director of Law and Justice? What does that job entail? I know because you have quite a wide array of responsibilities that come with it,
so
and a background that honestly fits it perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. So obviously I oversee the jail, and that's the jail and Geiger facility as well. And I oversee the medical examiner's office, the public defenders, pretrial services, counsel for defense, involved with the MacArthur Foundation, the grant efforts that are going forth with that, and along with the Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council. So all things I'm well familiar with and love to put my efforts toward them.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, before we dive into Measure 1, could you give our audience sort of kind of a lay of the land as of today on the two facilities as far as detention goes in Spokane County?
Sure. We have two facilities. One is downtown. It's located it's also where the booking area is at, and the main place where the law enforcement come to drop off their individuals for our custody. Then we also have another one out on the West Plains, which is the Geiger Correction Facility for less serious charges, and it fits a small niche of our population, serves as a minor overflow for some of those offenders that would otherwise be housed downtown. It's a sentencing option for our courts too, for some of the programming that we have and take part of out there. Okay. The jail was built in 1986, so I started 2 years after it was built. It has a design capacity of 462. On average, we're overcrowded over that population by at least 100 to 100, upward to 125 offenders. What that causes is double bunking in individual cells that would otherwise be set up for an individual. It really prohibits our opportunity for the interaction between the officers and the offenders, and have the opportunity to work with them and talk to them directly. So it's very limiting on the way of supervision because of the amount of people that are housed there. And the Geiger facility serves, like I said, a niche population from the jail that has lower end charges. It's a very porous facility, and it's located on the West Plains. And so I can get in talk about a little bit more about the two individual structures if you would like for me to as well.
If it's your call, but
okay.
Sure. I think the more information, the better.
So the downtown jail has got a portion of it that's also located above the public safety building, which is next door essentially to the jail that's located downtown. We have about 89 or so beds over there. It's the old style bars like you would see in a movie that has the bars that go along with it, along with some individual cells. And that's where our medical department is located over there as well, and some other our services. It's not ideal for housing prisoners. It's linear, similar to what I'll discuss about the Geiger Corrections Facility. So the demographics of our population has really changed. Back when the jail was designed, we didn't have near the serious levels of charges that we're having right now, but nearly 80% of our population is in there for, a Class A, B, or C felony. And so those can only be restricted to the downtown facility. And of those are predominantly in the pretrial, status instead of being a sentenced prisoner. And then on the flip side, Geiger facility more houses the lower end, like the misdemeanors and some of the gross misdemeanors and some low-level felonies that we also house out there.
Okay. So let's jump in and have a discussion about Measure 1. So sort of a little bit of background for our audience is back in December of 2022, the Board of County Commissioners made the decision to place on the November 2023 ballot a measure for a 0.2% sales tax to pay for criminal justice improvements. So could you explain some of the historical information on kind of what led to that decision?
You bet. I've been involved with the program or the project since 2008. In 2008, it was under a previous sheriff before Ozzie, and we were discussing what it would look like to have a new facility, increase the housing that we had. So I attended several classes at the National Institute of Corrections about planning jails, outcomes, and what jail design would look like, and some of the other things that are akin to it. We, in turn, hired some consultants from the National Institute of Corrections to come in and give us best practices, explain the process to us, which kind of led us up to some of the previous iterations of the overall campus and the way that it works. We've also been heavily involved with the justice reform efforts from the MacArthur Foundation, and then also some of the studies that have done that have happened, in conjunction with that for the Law and Justice Council that we have as well. So this is not a new thing. This has been a process. We've been going through the process for several years. As I said, I started in 2008 up to this process right here. And I think really what it came down to is just the seriousness level of the offenders that we have. The population is getting out and recidivates and comes back in, goes downtown or out to some other area and re-victimizes some folks that are out there. So I think all of that came to a head to where the leadership of our county commissioners said, okay, I think it's time for us to let the voters decide on this overall campus strategy and moving forward. It's not just a facility. It's much more than just a facility.
Yeah, and you touched on earlier on the age of both facilities, the downtown jail and Geiger. From a maintenance standpoint, could you kind of touch on what the need is from a maintenance angle for a new facility?
Yeah, so we'll start with the downtown jail. Like I said, it opened in 1986. It's open 24 hours a day. You could see the deterioration over the years. We've replaced the elevators because of the overcapacity. The kitchen is too small to feed the large number of offenders that we have right now, so it kind of works in cycles as it goes through. Our property storage has grown its capacity. It was meant to have a booking ratio of about 10,000 to come in through the door for annually. And we average admissions about 25,000 now and have for several years. So all of that takes toll on the interior of the jail. We do a good job of trying to maintain the maintenance, but really ideally it's best designed at its capacity. Okay. And that's why we want to get back to its capacity instead of continually overtaxing all of that, the infrastructure. The Geiger facility is a 1950s Army barracks. It was never designed to be a jail in the first place. It has had some other occupants, including the federal government, for a work camp and some of those things, but ultimately it became an overflow for the downtown jail to help save off some of the population. As I spoke about earlier, the demographics of the offenders have become more serious. And so it only satisfies a small niche of the population that's able to go out to that facility and work on that. It serves as our programming area, and it also serves as, some of those other functions. But you'll look through it, the pipes are deteriorating, the boilers have well outlived their capacity. The parts are becoming harder for us to find. If people there to specialize in that particular, steam structure and some of that stuff are becoming harder to find. So it's really outlived its useful capacity, well beyond.
Yeah, and so you've mentioned different numbers as far as bookings and individuals that have gone in and out of the jail. But can you touch a little bit on the average daily population and sort of what we look like today as far as that goes?
So the average daily population it stays primarily in the 800s and 900s throughout. There's been higher peaks that have gone above that and some peaks that have gone below that. Of course, during the COVID period, there was a decline. And what we saw was, some of the lower end charges were released from jail, and including some of those that are at the tail end of their sentence, may be released. It was up to the courts. The courts did the releasing portion of it. But since that period, there's a sharp increase in the people that needed to be in jail. So what it caused was a more composition of serious charges like we have today, which is predominantly felons, and then a lower end of the misdemeanors, which are typically the one that we'd be looking to send back out to the Geiger area to take part in some of those programs. Our sentence population dropped as well. So we averaged, like I said, about probably 100 to 125 over capacity at one point. And that's with an initiative we have, which is called the Spokane County Jail Release. And that's, the courts have given us as a population control measure the opportunity to immediately release some offenders upon booking. And so that constitutes like 14% of the folks that we release. And if we were to hang on to those, of course, our average daily population would go much higher.
Okay. So I'm sure one of the questions I'm sure our audience really wants to know is, it's like, so if Measure 1 passes, how much money are we talking about, and what's it going to be used for?
Well, like I said, it's not about just a facility. Of course, there's a debt service that's associated with it for the actual facility and the size of the jail that we could talk about, the actual picture, of the jail and what it looks like conceptually. It's a low-level conceptual at this point, but so what it would be used for is to construct an addition to the existing jail, which would house the overflow, that population that we have, and return the jail back to 462, its capacity. It would alleviate all of the population from Geiger, so we can move out of Geiger. That property can be leveled, with Geiger, you have to understand that, or I want the public to understand that it's leased property from the Spokane National Airport. And so when we vacate that property, one of our responsibilities is to basically level the place down to nothing. So money that we throw at it ultimately will be bulldozed over, in the future. And then we're also going to develop a community correction center, which is a sentencing alternative for the courts. It will involve all of our programming, and the programs that we have currently will be nestled into that building. But we'll also be able to offer programs to people in the medium building and the minimum building as well, because right now we don't have that opportunity to do that because it's all at Geiger. But we're going to take advantage of that too. And then whatever initiatives and whatever programs that we can do from the residual amount, we're going to look for opportunities to use that as well.
Okay, so you touched on a little bit of programming and different initiatives, but with expanding the existing jail, building on, and then with a community correction center, what are the biggest benefits to the community? So
largely the benefit is that we're hoping for better outcomes for the offenders. We think that by providing the necessary programming for them, and we're shifting away from a model that is a charge-based system which we have currently in place, and going to an individualized case management approach. Each individual will pick up a case manager. They'll be with that person through their justice involvement, and then they're going to be looking for specific programs to help them eliminate some of their barriers and cut down on recidivism. So I think from a taxpayer standpoint, that's important, because that's one thing we don't want as a repeat offender. And I think also from a taxpayer standpoint, we're going to invite the community to come in and help us with some of these services. So it gives our community an opportunity to help us, work with the justice involved and look for better outcomes.
Okay. Could you give us some examples on what some of those programs and services would be?
Yeah, some of the programs that we're looking at would be Breaking Barriers program, which is a 12-week program. It has everything from IOP to anger management and several other of the components to it that we've shown to help nationwide, to help with cut down on recidivism. And then also, like I had stated before, we're looking for those services to come in from the outside that we don't currently offer, which is child reunification. Some of those ones that are specialized by, the Department of, Social and Health Services and what other offices can provide, but those would all reside in there. So some of the programs that we're looking at, like I said, would be more of an individualized approach towards the individual and provide, not just have programs. We want to have the programs that matter, and either that or bring them in for the community to make a difference in the individual's life.
Okay, all right. So if Measure 1 passes, what sort of timeline are we looking at as far as construction goes?
So the National Institute of Corrections, if I get the word out, states it's about 5 years from the time you do the planning and the design work to the time it actually comes online. But that 5 years is not going to be wasted. There's a lot of things that have to happen on the front end of those 5 years. There's training staff for a new facility. There's new technologies that have to be learned. There's development of programs and sustainability options that go along with it. So during that 5 years, we're going to be focusing on that. So our projections start at the 2028 mark, but there's going to be a lot that takes place during that 5 years too.
Okay. Are there any alternatives to solutions or alternatives to the overcrowding that were looked at, that were tried prior to this ballot measure going on? Yeah,
we looked at a couple. Well, actually, we looked at about 3 different options. One was a company called Sprung, and they were a heavy fortified tent, basically, for lack of a better word, and they've used them all over the country to house offenders in. We looked at that model, having it out on the airport property. We looked at Conex boxes that could be welded together to form some additional housing out there as well. And then we looked at the alternative of maybe having them go to a different location. And none of those are going to be in the best interest of our community.
Okay, okay. You know, before we run out of time, time just always seems to go very fast on County Spotlight. But is there anything else that you'd really like our viewers to know about this? Anything you'd like to share with them that we didn't touch on?
Right. I would like to have the community really get involved. Look at our website. Look at the information. Become involved with the meetings, the several meetings that we're going to offer to the community on an educational purpose, and then really do their homework. Look and see what we're trying to solve, and look at the issues that we have right now we're facing, and then things that they think are beneficial for their public safety opinion, along with the rest of the community. And that's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mike, can you, for our audience, could you give us sort of an idea on what the new facility will look like? You know, it's probably conceptual at this point, but so people can really visualize what they would get if this ballot measure passes.
You bet. Again, it's conceptual. It's probably about 5% at the design. It has to go through a full design effort, which would have been included in the 5 years that I was talking about earlier to the actual build for it. But if you look at the monitor to our left here, you can see the existing jail is there, and that would be returned to its original capacity of 462. And then adjacent to it would be what is called the new tower on the drawing here. And that would have about 768 beds in it to offset the population from Geiger, remove the overflow from that, and then the growth out to 2028, because we're talking 5 years until we can actually move into the facility. And so you can look from the projections that have been done on it, that by 2053, we're looking at a total population of about 1,486, 1,500-ish, and then a move-in of about 1,300 to 1,358 when we actually move in. And so the jail will have pods that are sectioned off, so we can move into them incrementally. And so as the programs are developed, they make the necessary impacts to the front end on diversion. We're diverting off population. We're having programs that are successful. We're not having as much recidivism, the demographic, any of those number of things that could occur between now and 30 years from now, that we can move into them incrementally. And so we can work with the board. The board could have some direction on it as well. We'll be able to make some forecasting and do that portion of it. And then the vehicle sally port, our vehicle sally port is connected to our booking area. It allows about 3 patrol cars into it at once. Several cars are parked outside in queue, waiting for their opportunity to get it. That means they're not on the street. That means they're waiting in the parking lot to book their offenders. And the new vehicle sally port will allow pullouts so they can actually pull into the building, wait for their time in queue, and then book their individuals. Also, our sally port, as it is right now, the ambulance for a response has to back in from the alleyway to get into our sally port. This would allow an ambulance to pull right into the facility and render services. And along with fire trucks can no way get into our existing first responders into our sally port, it would be large enough to handle that capacity as well. So it would be an expanding booking area with a lot of opportunity for an open booking area, pretrial services, and some of those other services to reside there, along with a clean pathway through to the next street rather than a circuitous route. And then there's a community correction center, which is also adjacent to it. And I said earlier that will have 128 beds in it. It's a sentencing alternative for the courts, along with a logical pathway back to the community for better outcomes for our community.
Okay, all right, and you had touched. I see kitchen is on here, and you had also mentioned earlier that the current facility, there's constraints around the kitchen. Could you kind of expand on sort of from an efficiency standpoint how this would help?
Well, thank you for bringing that, because I did miss that. Our kitchen right now, we have two separate kitchens, one at downtown and one out at Geiger. So there's a duplication of services on a couple different fronts that, along with our medical department, our mental health department, and a lot of those things are duplicative services. We want to bring it all downtown. And then we want to build a kitchen that has enough capacity to feed those three buildings there that you see on the graph. And then we also are responsible for feeding a juvenile facility as well. Okay. So that would take an increase in the size of the kitchen and relocate it on the first floor as well.
Okay, and I know that there's been some discussion about, expanding this to also include possibly a courtroom as well for first appearances or other types of services. Could you explain sort of how that all plays into this? Because the criminal justice system it's such a large entity. I mean, when you think about it, it's not just a jail. It's not just the police or the sheriff's department. I mean, there's the courts, there's pretrial, there's everything. But having a courtroom right there in the facility as well, plays an important role in all that. Could you kind of talk about just how that decision was made, with space planning, and again from an efficiency standpoint?
Well, obviously consolidating the services in one area is going to be a huge lift, or a huge benefit to us. Along with that, I think the community needs to understand that the jail is an intricate part of the law and justice system. But along with the courts, we hold them until they go to court. That sometimes that length of stay could be minimal, sometimes it could be a long period of time, depending on how serious the crime is. So we have to accommodate the housing. We have to have a booking area for the law enforcement, some point for them to drop it off, and then we also have to have some community involvement on the back side of it. But when you look at the jail, it's like any infrastructure, critical infrastructure. It grows by population. Our county has grown. When this was built, it was in 300,000. Our population, we're well over that now, in population of 500,000 range. And so as it grew, it should keep pace with the population of the county. A school, when an area gets too big and the population grows, they build another school. So they keep pace with the population as it grows. This is similar to that. It has to serve a function for the courts, the law enforcement, and also for the community, for public safety.
Yeah, and earlier we talked about different efforts, and things that you looked at as far as other structures, whether they were the tent-like structures or some of the other options. But I mean, the amount of programming that has gone in to help bring down the population as well, and it's all connected. All of these things tie together, and this is just another important piece to the whole criminal justice system as we move forward, as we become more efficient and more effective at keeping the community safe.
Yeah, it's like I said, this effort is Spokane County's Justice Center. It's more than just a building.
Yes.
It's a means to accomplish our goals that we want to accomplish with the justice system.
Yeah. All right, Mike. Well, I'm sorry, but we are running low on time. But I really want to thank you for being here with us today, and really for everything that you've done for the people of Spokane County. You're a leader in the community, and I want to say thank you for everything that you've done that you've done for us here.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, as a reminder, a video of today's Spotlight can be accessed on our Spokane County homepage and, as always, on our Spokane County YouTube channel. Well, that's it for the show today, folks. I'm your County Commissioner Josh Kerns, and thank you again for joining us on Spokane County Spotlight.